Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group for Worksite Solutions. And today we're going to give you an idea of the group sales process from the top down. Since this industry, this part of the market is fairly new to everyone, we feel it's a topic that we want to just keep revisiting and keep kind of trying to drive the point home and give you that kind of guidebook of what do you need to have, what do you need to know as you're moving through maybe even your first group case. We're seeing a lot of people from repeatedly attending the study groups, asking us really good questions, few calls here and there, starting to find their first group opportunities. And it's one of the most common questions we get asked. How does this thing actually work? And how do I work with you guys? So we hope to give you a general overview. We hope to give you a specific overview as to how we do things and how people are generally working with us on group cases. And we hope to kind of present this in a way where we will obviously give the general overview, but also try to do it with a focus of how can someone go from their first couple of cases with us assisting them to something where they feel more self-sufficient and in control, though we are still here for all the value add that you know us for. So why don't we just dig into it, Mark? Any thoughts that you have before we kind of dive into like the very ground floor to I have a group and I need some help?
Yeah, no, it's a little chicken and egg, as we all know, right? You want to know enough to feel confident to present it to a group, but you kind of have to have a group to really get to experience it, to learn it. So it just takes that leap of faith, to have the confidence to present it. And I think that's probably where we'll kick it off too, is just, how to get off the ground.
Yeah. So I guess we can start just like real briefly because we're going to go through
Hmm.
the rest of the process as well. But why don't we talk about um, just, I guess, how to identify groups that are a good fit. And I think it's good to constantly bring this up too, because we're seeing more and more opportunities entering the market with different carriers every single month. So I guess the lens that you should use for identifying groups tends to change rather quickly too. So now that we
Yeah.
have more small group options out there, what should we really be looking for, whether it's a group of, five or a group of 500?
Yeah. I mean, kind of the same fact finder that you would do on the individual side when you think about it. Where is the company located? So what state are they in? Um, what is their rationale, desire? What's the reason for wanting to get long-term care insurance in the first place? So if you think about the questions, they're the same questions, that you would ask to kind of get some information about the opportunity. But to your point, Jason, just a few months ago, we might have said you need at least 50, you need at least 100 employees. Now, we could say maybe only 3 or 5 is necessary, as new carriers have come into the market. So I think that limitation is starting to be removed, but it's not that simple because even if you get 3 or 5, they still have to be the right 3 or 5 cases. You're still going to want employer funding, and you want to have that conversation about funding early on, just to set expectations that you can deliver on what you promise, because the client's expectation may be different in terms of looking for a voluntary only offering for 5. That's not necessarily going to cut it. So good news is that the more options there are, the more you can say yes. And let me look into that for you. Again, if you're not sure, it's always okay to say, let me look into that for you, but we'll explore the market. And then again, that's where we have our process to help, you guide you to the right solution.
Yeah, and I think we get that question an awful lot. I have a group that's anywhere from 5 to 50 people. Why does it seem like employer funding is basically a requirement? And the answer really is, even if you are knocking it out of the park, I mean, you're completely on fire with your enrollment. You're doing an excellent job. The marketing's there. There's interest there. You got to remember that participation comes out around 10% if you're doing a really good job with long-term care. And if you even think about that on the high side for small groups, for a group of 50, that means you're getting about 5 applications. And given all of the work that the carrier and really everybody involved has to go through to be able to make the enrollment the success that it would be, uh, oftentimes doesn't end up economical. So that employer funding guarantees that participation, gives a little bit of predictability to the economics of the situation. And like we said with group sales, there are a lot of fingers in the pie on these cases. So just that guarantee of participation, guarantee that there's not going to be an offer pulled or any egg on the face or anything of that nature. There's lots of reasons why employer funding is so important for smaller groups. But I just want to, real quick, Mark, just remind people that in the buddy system, from your dashboard, you can go to sales guides, group/worksite. We have the sales process kind of spelled out for you here simply at a high level, including how to identify groups. So if you want a little study guide for after this discussion, we talk about demographics, ideal industries, and just other general favorable group characteristics to target if you're still looking for your first case.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add to what you said too is it's always important to understand the entire ecosystem. What's in it for the carrier, what's best for the carrier, how do you build a long-term partnership there, as well as for yourself and for your client. And for the carriers, they also want to get a spread of risk. These are not designed to be individual products. They are designed to be a worksite benefit. So they want to see that it's offered to everybody in the group. They also want to get participation that's going to give them a spread of risk to get the guaranteed issue underwriting. So we kind of start to navigate away from that concept. You start to run into a lot of challenges, not just because you don't hit the participation, but then you get a claim early on. It's going to be hard for you to actually do business with that carrier. And you have to understand that that's not the purpose of why they're putting the products out there. So
guaranteed issue doesn't come from the carrier's goodness of their heart, generosity, right? There are things that are mechanisms that are set in place alongside that offer to make sure that they can continue to offer it. And of course, if we want these products and opportunities to be available, you have to be a good partner to the carrier and make sure you're getting them that good risk so they can keep their doors open so you can sell their product.
Yeah. And they do evaluate you more on the worksite or employee benefits divisions. They look at you year by year and they look at what your loss ratios look like. That's how they look at the general agencies. That's how they look at brokers. So it really is important to have a good track record with them from a loss ratio perspective, meaning how many claims are you getting versus how much premiums are you bringing in? Because at a certain point, they're going to say, we don't know if we want to work with you as a broker. So keep your record clean. Again, we're always looking for a win-win type of situation. And if you do get a sense that it's going to be just insurance for one person that's uninsurable and they're not really desiring this to have this as a worksite benefit, you probably want to actually steer clear of going in this direction. You probably want to go more to the individual market and look for alternatives that are designed for that purpose.
Yep. Nobody wants anything on their permanent record going back to school and even to now, right? So I think that was good to cover. Anybody have any questions on groups to identify? And one of the things that I want to make clear is that we are having that discussion on employer funding when we know the size of the group, when we have all the relevant data, when we're going into that conversation. We talk about employer funding very, very early on into the discussion. It's not something that you're going to want to add on later after you've talked about, oh, I have this excellent guaranteed issue offer, long-term care, a doubling of the benefit, all of these nice shiny things, and then saying, hey, this is going to have to be an employer funded benefit. I think if you're transparent with HR, with the broker, whoever you're talking to, you'll get that respect back. And also you'll be able to weed out the good cases from the bad much more quickly. If there's a clear, I don't have the budget to employer fund, or I don't plan or ever employer fund any benefits, then right away before you waste any more time working on this case that it might not be a good candidate and it's best to part ways and go on to the next one, right? So lots of benefits to getting that out early in the conversation so that nobody's surprised. Are there any groups that are too large? Question from Patty. That's a super good question. Are there any groups that are too large, Mark?
It's hard to imagine because the bigger it is, the bigger opportunity it is, Patty, but it's a great question. You need to have the right team and resources to handle large groups. So definitely you want to say yes, you want to take advantage of the opportunity. just to be aware of a couple of things. One, it will take longer. There's more gatekeepers, there's more brokers you have to work with, there's more approvals required. So, just have to be in it for the long run. And then when you're thinking about how to implement it, you're probably going to want to make sure you have that discussion with your team about what platform we're using, what marketing support do you have, because large group doesn't necessarily mean high participation rates. And again, the carriers are going to have minimum participation requirements. So a lot of times you have to really establish that this is going to get marketed the right way. And then
It's a lot of
finally,
people to reach, right?
yeah, and then during enrollment, as you can imagine, the larger the group is, the more traffic there's going to be and consultations you might have to do. Too much for any one person to do. You may even want to have a team of specialists, and that's what we put together for our largest groups. So it's a great question, but I would say, let's have that discussion and see if there's a good fit or a good strategy, because there's a lot of large groups out there that want this product and don't have the right expertise. So I think it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, and then it's also the biggest possible stress test that you could give any of your systems, right? And I think everybody wants to be able to offer white glove hands-on service to every single person of every single group. It's just not feasible. So you really need to be able to scale through a really, really good sort of self-service technology system and make sure that things are even more efficient for as many people as you're going to be getting in front of.
And
But
sometimes the carriers don't help you as much as you think they will. So just be mindful of that. They have a lot of dysfunction in their servicing and their process, and you want to take control and destiny into your own hands when you can.
yeah, the larger group you have, the larger runway you'll also want to make sure you leave yourself to be able to meet that stress test as well before you actually start to kick things off with the enrollment. All right. So that was a good kind of discussion on identifying groups and just kind of some of the very early things we're saying for small groups and kind of for large groups. But I want to talk about the key that turns on the ignition when it comes to working with us and working with groups. So if you have an interested group who you would like to vet to see if this is a good opportunity to go and try to get proposals from carriers for that you think might be a good candidate for long-term care planning, there are a couple of pieces that I would say are going to need to be in your starter pack, or you're going to want to have handy in your backpack. So one of the things is our group form, which I'll go over in a moment. If you're working with us on that group, that will give us the relevant data that we need to know. Also attached to that form is a copy of our census template. You may have your own. The employer may have their own that they use for other benefits. We can really take whatever they've got, as long as it's got a few key pieces of information on it, but we do have a template in case you'd like to have something to be able to provide to that employer. And we say it every time because we use it every time, is our one pager. And we've got a number of different one pagers that Gretchen and her team have produced for your use that kind of fit a couple of different use cases. So now we've got a one pager for groups over 100, and we've got small group one pager, and we've got a one pager for associations as well. So it'll be down to kind of identifying what opportunity is in front of you at the moment, having that one pager. And that's, I think, a good place for us to start, and then we'll continue to move on through the process with the rest of the call. But I want to start with the group form. Obviously, if you have an opportunity and you have questions, you can feel free to, contact us to get your questions answered if it's very early stage. If you feel like the opportunity is warm and it's time for that census and discovery and RFP, request for proposal process, this is where you need to start. buddyins.com/group. Quite simple. Relatively self-explanatory form. You can choose, I want more information about selling groups, or I have a group request and want to talk to somebody. So you'll fill out group name. Your email would be likely here as the primary group contact email, but if you do have somebody else involved, like a broker or a key contact, somebody you'd like to, have close to the correspondence on this case, you can feel free to fill them in here. Type of business, we just want to get an idea of what sort of industry they're in, right? Number of employees, self-explanatory. And then just a couple of discovery questions. Is the employer offered long-term care previously? Or same with an association. Have they offered long-term care previously? Or will they be funding any part of the plan? Okay, so if you've had discussions up to that point, you can let us know yes or no. There's also an unsure option there. Additional comments and tell us more about your opportunity. I think both of these fields, whichever one you choose when the moment strikes you, but I would say under additional comments, give us some, I guess, if they're interested in employer funding, if they have an idea of how they might want to do that employer funding, that might be where you put that. They want to do some sort of carve out, or maybe they want to fully fund a basic plan and do a buy-up option for their employees. Notes on strategy there would be very helpful. And then just your name, email, any accounts you're tied to, if that's if you're tied to an account or a BGA IMO, let us know. And telling us more about your opportunity, that's where you can kind of give us some of the flavor, right? So if you are closely connected with a small business owner and you've had a conversation and they were interested for one reason or another, I think any little detail can really help us out a lot. If you have another broker partner that's involved, that can really help us out a lot because we can kind of start to understand the dynamics and how to kind of best communicate. And we understand that there are more people that need to be involved with communication than just yourself. Anything that you feel will help us, and almost any relevant information about the group can generally help us, not only just to develop plan design, but also if you'd like us to be a part of an initial conversation, which we do very often for partners of ours who have group opportunities. Any little bit helps there. And then the census template is right down at the bottom here. Okay. So this is really the first place to start when you've got an opportunity that's really ready to go. If you've already got a census in hand, even better. I would do your best to kind of lock down or password protect or some sort of encryption. If you have any PII in that census, please make sure to slap a password on it for us so that we can make sure that data is kept securely. That's something we take very seriously. But if the data is just rather anonymized with ages, no names, things of that nature, we can generally just take what you have. If we want to review the census template real quick, I won't bore you with this, but just some information that we generally like to have, if this will cooperate with me here. So just looking at the headers, you won't need all of this. You may not be able to get all of this, but this is just some of the stuff that helps. Gender, marital status to find out, do we have a high concentration of, spouses in this group? Date of birth or age is fine. Resident states are really important to know so we can know kind of the breakdowns. That also helps us kind of read into, hey, do we have the potential of another situs state? If originally we're coming in and looking at a state and it's not necessarily a fit for some of the top products we'd recommend for that group, that's a way to say, hey, 40% of these employees are actually in another state, which is more favorable. Do they have an executive or sort of a second headquarters that we can maybe use as an opportunity to cite us in a different state? Salaries are generally quite important, but again, not necessarily required. But just knowing the average income of the group generally helps, especially when we put our pom-poms on and try to campaign for this group to the carrier for a good offer. you know, knowing that the employees have that disposable income for a voluntary portion of an enrollment definitely gives them a more positive outlook that there will be more participation if we can get that engagement. Spouse partner data, we rarely see this come through on censuses, but great if we can get it again. Job title, hire date, and full or part-time status is also pretty good to know. Again, actively at work is one of the requirements, and the actively at work requirement generally sits somewhere, depending on the group makeup, at 30, sometimes 20 hours a week. Hire date really helps as well for groups that may be considering a carve out. So there are a number of different categories that we can potentially carve out, not only those who are you know, the highest compensated employees, but sometimes people like to carve out by tenure. I want to be able to reward and continue to retain my longest tenured employees. It's very costly to retrain people, so I'd like to kind of do some sort of compensation with a long-term care plan that way. But this is just the for starters, this is like the full menu. If we saw all of this, we'd have kind of as much information as we'd need to do whatever we need to do. But again, you won't come away with all of this information every time, and that's completely fine. You can also fill out the group name, your name here, group type. We've got employer or association there for you. Corporation type can generally be helpful for us to know as well. And funding source is generally to let us know if we're looking at employer funded or you know, a combination of employer funded and voluntary, full voluntary. Just helps us understand maybe what the intentions are for the group at the outset. Mark, anything else to go over with the census and information we need?
Yeah, no, I think this top right section is really key. Because if you give us the state, you give us kind of the strategy, if you will, with the funding source, usually we'll know kind of the top 2 or 3 carriers right
Yep.
away. The number of employees, obviously, we can find from the list here. The reality is that it's hard to get a census right out of the gate. So what order you do this in might vary. You know, if you have someone's really excited, interested, gives you the census off and running, you'll go down this path. But they might say, well, I want to learn more about it first. And you might start with the one pager, which Jason is going to go through. And a lot of times you don't have to worry about, you know, presenting something, you know, solid. You know, you can just kind of say, like, here's an offer that we commonly get. You know, these are just estimated rates. I would take it that way too. Making progress is really important. You know, anything that kind of creates friction and slows the client down, gets them to deprioritize this, can really cause you to lose that interest quickly. So make sure you have this really active conversation where you're able to get back quickly when the interest is there, get back with information as quickly as you can, and then work them through this process to get you the census. And don't make this a bottleneck.
Yeah.
You know, if you put too much emphasis on this and it just creates too much friction, you might lose the opportunity altogether.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. And no group sale ever starts off on the same exact foot or with the same exact level of temperature, I guess I could say that as. Claude added some really good knowledge here. Hire date is also important to indicate stability of the staff, and that can be important to the carrier and to the enroller. A recent acquisition may have those employees looking like they just started, but they could have been with the company much longer. That's really good to know. Thank you for that information, Claude. That's very, very helpful for us to be able to understand. So yeah, you won't start with the census every time, but just to kind of let you know what it is, some of the information we're looking for. Again, the employer may have their own on hand. I would not expect them to recreate the wheel just to get this into our template. We can work with whatever they have, just to let you know that our template is there for you. And as Mark alluded to, in our marketing section, you may find that the group is not so ready to just hand over a census right away, and who can really blame them? A lot of them want to start with a conversation, but this allows you to kind of give that carrot, right? Here is a concept, here is a common offer that we're typically getting for you know, groups like yours. And we will not be able to know what we can truly come back with and offer until we have that census data so that it can be analyzed and we can figure out who we can actually request for proposal to get offers back, right? So this this document, I hope it's nauseating to you because that means you've seen it enough times to understand its importance. But we have a number of one-page sell sheets. I've got the small group one that I've just opened there. But we also have for groups of 100 plus into large group one pagers, and we've got the association one pager as well. So I'll open up a couple of these, but we'll start with just the small group for now. This is something you want to make sure that you have in hand for your group conversation. Why? Probably the primary reason is there are a billion different talking points about guaranteed issue group long-term care. And if you don't have something to kind of keep you organized and highlight the big important pieces of why group long-term care, the conversation is going to end up like a pinball machine. You will end up pinballing back and forth and kind of talking yourselves around in circles, but missing some of the most important pieces. We need to understand why long-term care is important to this group. We need to understand who's eligible. We need to understand some of the high-level product features. We need to know what kind of underwriting is involved and who might be subject to that underwriting. Understanding the different benefit levels of the plan and what triggers what underwriting, extremely important. Even knowing that, you know, we might not say this enough, but one of the things that always gets the interested nod from HR or any executives is that the plan is fully portable to an individual certificate should you separate from the employer for any reason. So just understanding some of these concepts that are of high value, but also understanding estimated costs. Now, we build conservative pricing into these one pagers because the way we use the one pager is to set up the rest of the sale and get the employer to understand the concept of these plans. It's super important to know that we will adjust these numbers and just use the one pager over, but with the specifics that come back from a carrier proposal, right? And that really helps with kind of continuity. Remember that one pager we used to kind of get you to understand this plan? Well, we've got actual numbers back from the carrier, and here's how we did. It's a nice way to tie things back to that beginning discovery process, but now put the company directly into the shoes of the one pager, right? To show them exactly what we've gotten back so they can get an accurate picture. And quite honestly, the pricing generally comes quite in line with what we have here on just this general one pager, because we build in a conservative level of pricing so that we're not presenting bad surprises, I think is the best way to. So we are preventing bad surprises because we don't want to show something that's it's like quoting a client preferred when we know they have health issues, right? We want to be conservative on the pricing so that if we come back right on the line, then, you know, we ended up with what we said we might end up with. And if we do better, then we're generally a hero, right? That's a good surprise. But Mark, any other comments? I know this is an everyday thing for us, but any other comments that you want to make sure that people know about this one pager?
Yeah, I use this every single day, and this is editable. That's why it's in Canva here. You create a free account, so it doesn't cost you anything. All you have to do is click into the grid. You can delete bullets. You can edit any of the bullets.
Yeah, use template for new design. Whenever you click on any of these, you'll see the Canva link, and then you'll hit use template for new design. If you have a free Canva account, that's all you need, and you can edit this every single time.
Yeah, and then the way to print it is go to the share button at the top right. And then usually what I'll do is the download.
Mhm.
and then I'll change it from PNG to PDF print. And then just download it. And that is just going to download it into your, where you download your other documents. If you click on that, Jason, there it is. So when you edit it, you literally can customize this for any group you run into. You're not locked into what we're showing here. And the reason why we have this sample product is this is one particular carrier, but there might be, half a dozen to choose from. And you might want to make it more generic, or you might want to lean towards a different carrier. It's okay to take this document or one of the 3 templates, they're all kind of based on different carriers, and edit it. A lot of times I'll add the client name to the title. I'll say, XYZ company long-term care with life insurance. It makes it feel more like it's their plan, right? And you can get that to them in like 10 minutes. So it's really impressive how you can almost like customize something without even doing an RFP, without even talking to the carrier, that makes it feel like it's theirs. Those little touches, I think, make a big difference and kind of mentally commit them to like moving forward with their plan.
Yeah, I agree. And that's important that you mentioned the editability of this, because there are some times where we can go into meetings with this one pager at face value. But like you said, every group has different needs. Every group is viewed by the carrier differently, depending on state, depending on makeup, depending on objectives. There's always going to be something that you want to customize. The fact that you can do it with just 2 clicks, I can't understate the value that that has had for us, not only to set up that beginning conversation and keep you in line and make sure you're organized and kind of covering all the bases, but again, as a way to return after you've gotten proposals back to say, here's how we actually ended up, and tying it all back into that education. You come back into this one pager and you see the YLTCI line again, and that reminds you to say, now remember, we talked about doing a long-term care plan for your employees because of XYZ objective, right? And here's what we put together to kind of help you solve that.
The other thing I
So
would add, Jason, is that
awesome.
page 2, if you scroll down to page 2, this is an optional second page. There's a little like trash can button above that. You can delete this and it will just make it a 1-page document really easily, but don't do that yet because I want to show what page 2 is. This is a way for you to walk through how this particular product works, because the most common initial objection you'll get or confused question you'll get is, why am I getting long-term care on a life insurance product? And it's really important to help them understand how this is a more efficient way to deliver the long-term care, largely because of that extension rider, right? That's a big part of a lot of the value proposition of these sales. And this allows you to walk through. You're getting a $200,000 pool of LTC. We're going to take out $8,000 a month for long-term care. And then once you use up your death benefit of $200,000, you're getting another $200,000. Once you explain that to the client, they get it. It makes more sense as to why this LTC is similar to a traditional LTC policy in terms of the purpose of it. And then again, you can talk about the benefits and the guarantees and the reasons why these products have become popular. But this is designed to allow you to do that. If it's a client where you think this is not going to resonate well, again, you can delete the second page and just walk them through the 1-pager. So,
by the way, easily brandable as well.
Yep, put in your contact information. Again, make it more professional. Make it look like you've done this before, right? This gives you the tools that give you that experience to have that brand, if you will.
We want you to make this yours because your sales, your cases are yours at the end of the day. So we want to build you up as that subject matter expert and the person who's prepared with branded estimates that are answering all of their questions. We want you to be that way because we want this market to grow and we want more people to be involved. So feel free to take advantage of these resources because we're not offering you anything that we don't use ourselves every single day. Okay, so I think that covers the 1-pager, the census, and the form. So I think at this point, I would like to see if anybody has any questions up to this moment. Otherwise, we'll go into just a tiny bit, Mark, on what we do with the census. We don't need to deep dive into it, but we'll talk that. We'll talk the quoting RFP process, and then I want to shift to knowing all of that. If you wanted to become self-sufficient with Buddy INS as your group partner, what would that look like?
Okay.
Any questions, or are we just the foremost experts? Every one of us. Yeah, all right. I like the confidence.
Jeff had a question in the chat.
Oh, can we just tee up and refer deals for Buddy to work? It's a good question. I would say for the most part, we are generally, we are generally hand-holding for the first couple of cases. But for the most part, we would like cases to be done with some sort of account manager. Not to say that you are responsible for the whole heavy lift, but we need someone to help us manage the countless people that can be involved with some of these enrollments. So if you don't necessarily want to be the subject matter expert, the full-on broker, that's completely fine. But if you or somebody you work with, somebody in your organization is interested in being that sort of account manager that can help with the back and forth, understanding the deadlines, being kind of involved in the pulse, not so much somebody doing the deliverable work, but being that quarterback, that pulse, that's something that we're generally looking for in cases. But Mark, you can feel free to
Yeah.
add
I
to
don't
that.
think anybody just wants to throw something over the fence, to be honest. I mean, it's your relationship. So ultimately we want you to maintain that relationship. And the only way to do that is to kind of be there, just attend the meetings, to Jason's point. But you're not going to have to do a lot of heavy lift in that model.
Yeah, that's actually a super good opportunity to go through. We had a sample checklist, and I don't want to give anybody's name out, but we have a group enrollment checklist for every single enrollment that we do. And each of those enrollments has an account manager, kind of the role that I'm alluding to here. And they're almost not mentioned at all on the group enrollment checklist, but it's a tool for the account manager to know what is going on, when it needs to be done by, and who is actually responsible for doing it. So we do kind of support that person in that role. But I think once we hit implementation time, Mark, I'm sure you've experienced this too. The account manager goes from being pretty involved in what's going on to almost taking a back seat and watching the enrollment work outside of asking any questions they have and still kind of staying in the know.
Yeah, Jeff, you work with other agents I know as well. And so a lot of times one of your agents will want to be that quarterback. So again, there will be an opportunity. If you have an opportunity, there will be someone that will help you kind of see it through, even if you're really busy with your other business. Don't be afraid to kind of refer it, because we'll probably be able to assign it or train an agent that you're working with. It's kind of related to Adele, your question as well. Absolutely. You can have, other agents underneath you, because a lot of times they're playing that role. Right? And maybe you're getting an override and they're getting kind of that account manager compensation. But that way, both of you are taking on the roles that you have the time for. And the relationship is still being nurtured by the right people.
Yeah, and we've seen that kind of relationship be very, very successful. A broker who is being everything to every one of their groups really is that relationship master, that rainmaker, that trusted sort of advisor to all of the groups. And then we have an account manager who works with them that helps with that pre-sale implementation side for groups, especially because group long-term care is just kind of coming back in a big way. Those brokers out there who are not familiar with long-term care or have not really seen the market as it is today are generally looking for folks to be able to help with that quarterbacking and help with just, again, being that glue that kind of keeps everybody together pre-sale and beyond. So yeah, that can make a very, very successful relationship for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it now, you basically have any model that you seek working with us. If you want to do this on your own as well, we have a model for that where you can leverage our contracts, leverage our underwriting offers, the preferred underwriting offers, maybe get advice from us in terms of how best to set up the platform, but not have to split commission at all the way to I need to refer a case and I want to only take a little bit, but have someone else do the heavy lift. We have that available too.
Yep. Yep. Any way, shape, or form, which kind of makes my next question maybe a little tough to answer, right? But can you give us a little bit more on that I'd rather do it myself role? And can you also kind of, you know, pair that up a little bit with I would like Buddy INS's help, but would also like to remain relatively self-sufficient.
Sure.
There's a giant spectrum within there. So if we can just
Yeah.
break
And
that out
again,
a little bit.
it's all similar to the individual side of the business. So we have all the relationships, we have the knowledge to help point you in the right direction. At the end of the day, if you fill out that group form, you say, hey, I want to do this myself, we can kind of guide you to the right answers so you don't have to learn it the hard way. The one thing I would caution you on is if you have never done group or enrollments before, you probably want to have somebody partnering with you, especially that first time or that first couple of times. So I would leave that for people, that in this group that have experience of working with groups before and that confidence. That's the model to follow, is definitely go down that self-service path. And again, it's more of that GA role where, you're getting, advice, you're getting relationships, you're getting quotes, kind of underwriting. But for the most part, you're really running with that case and setting it all up yourself. We have a full service model as well that is more like Buddy's your enrollment partner, and that's what I'd recommend if you're doing this for the first time. Whether it's a big case or a small case, there's a lot of work involved in setting up groups that's different from the individual side. And like
Yep.
we kind of alluded to earlier, the carrier is not going to do that for you. They might say that they will, but if you want to do the education the way it should be done for long-term care and get participation, usually the carriers are not set up to provide that. They're voluntary benefit carriers that are used to a different model, on-site benefit counselors, those types of enrollments. So just be aware of that so you don't end up with egg on your face for an important client. And again, we'll help you when you submit the group form, know which direction to go.
Yep. I think I get the question a lot. I may be on the edge of an opportunity. What do I need to know? Right. And I think if you're asking that question, you're definitely somebody who is a candidate for that kind of full service. We can take you under our mentorship and show you every step as we go, because at the end of the day, we want you to be able to feel like you have the confidence and bandwidth to eventually do this yourself with us as kind of your MGA guiding you along. So we will help introduce you to the carrier contacts. We'll show you exactly how we do each piece of that process so that you can understand, okay, the difficulty is not so much in knowing the person and sending an RFP, but it's also in seeing how we follow up and just how we're communicating with each group member, each important contact throughout the enrollment. I think if you are feeling like you don't have enough knowledge, but you may have an opportunity, I think you just need to learn by doing. Because when Mark and I were kind of first starting working with some of these newer products and pre-sale for groups, for the first time in my career, really, I didn't feel like I really started learning until I dug my heels in and worked with a real group for the first time, start to finish. That doesn't mean you can't build the plane while you're flying it. It's just that you might need, just that mentorship, kind of a joint work approach to show you each step and how it's done so that you can kind of learn efficiently that way.
Hey, those of you, sorry for jumping in here, but those of you who have not done worksite or have do long-term care individually, you would be foolish not to use their services and bounce things off of them throughout the process. I've had a few opportunities and they've been extremely helpful, and I've only been doing this for 34 years. So I've done I've done a lot of individual business, and I've done some pretty large groups and some good associations over the years. But this is a completely different world that we're dealing with today with the worksite products. So,
Thank you for
and they're
that,
right.
Brian.
You know, you got a lot of questions. As we had one case with a lot of questions about why the life insurance with the long-term care. So I learned that becomes a little bit of an issue as well.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, but I appreciate, definitely don't take it upon yourself to do it the first time. Whatever you give up is going to be well worth it.
Thanks for that, Brian. It's been,
Oh, no worries.
great working with you as well.
Yeah, no.
Jackie is sharing a little bit of her experience in the chat. I agree. It's more work than the old-fashioned individual group. Appreciate the help in getting from market company with the group we're working on. Also, it can be a longer process than you thought compared to individual. Yes, I can absolutely agree with that. And I think I know, which case you're talking about. And that one is something that took a lot longer than we thought it originally would at the outset. You just never know what's going to pop up in some of these conversations. And that's why I think even if you have your hand held for the first 1-2 cases, if something extremely unusual pops up, instead of having to handle the kind of stress and maybe confusion on your own, you've at least got a group of people to bounce ideas off of and get through to the other side with.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too that Jackie brings up is if you have a really good advocate internally and they're doing this for the right reason, they'll come back to you. Even if it takes a lot longer, you're not going to lose the interest. It's going to stay there. So that's another reason to ask that why question, because it also will tell you how likely it is to close. If you have that advocate, you have the right rationale, it will close. Just kind of stay with it. If you don't, then I would caution you that you may not want to invest as much time because that one will disappear. And a lot of
Yeah.
times they're motivated like you are. You're partnering with a benefit broker or somebody that's compensated, a licensed agent that's compensated. They're incentivized also to close this case with you. So rely on your partners to help guide you as well. It's not all on your shoulders to do that.
It's just like Rhonda says all the time on the individual side. She said it a couple of times in presentations on the individual study group. If you know that why, and things do slow down or people fall off the radar, people appreciate that staying power, that wanting to help, but also tying it back into, I'm doing this because we have this objective that we know we can solve, but we just haven't yet put the pieces together yet, right? And that's always appreciated. I think you can't give up when it gets tough. You just have to have those reminders at the end of the day. Gene asks, are you hearing from employers concerned about potential payroll tax deductions as per Washington state? I would say less often than I thought, but it does depend state to state and where the rumors actually lie. I know from our perspective as Buddy INS, talking to groups about potential long-term care, it's not what we're leading with, but we may hear that groups have had experience with brokers that lead with it and lead rather forcefully, and they feel burned, intimidated. It's definitely a way to scare a group. That's not necessarily what we're about. We take the position of, if this is something you were going to do anyway for reasons other than the payroll tax, then it's better to get ahead of it should it happen. That's kind of the approach we're taking. But from groups that are out there in, say, California or New York, or groups that have had rumblings of a potential payroll tax, I would say it's half less of the groups that we're talking to.
Doesn't come up too often. Like you said, it's more of a reinforcement that it's going to happen sooner or later. So might as well bite the bullet and do it now. Actually, it's a really good lead in for other brokers. That's where I've had some success. I was at a convention 2 weeks ago, and for an association we were enrolling, I was at their booth, and there was another booth that was a cooperative that provides benefits to doctors. And the person at that booth was a former banker's agent with a lot of long-term care experience. And so she lit up when we started talking about guaranteed issue long-term care. And then the payroll tax, like, she actually came back to our booth and was like, tell me again about what's going on. And she got excited about the opportunity to get in front of it. Do you know what I mean? So it was definitely more of a self-motivated type of intentionality, but that's what built the advocacy, got her to recommend that this cooperative talk to us, right, to add this to their portfolio, their platform. And ultimately, the right outcome happens because it is a great product, regardless of whether the tax happens, to Jason's point. But if you're working with other brokers, I think it's worth bringing up, but it's important to let them know not to use it as a scare tactic, to Jason's point.
Yep. We all know the letter. About 150 people sent us that in one day. So I'm sure that got around a lot. But the one pager, again, here's why it's by your side. It's got language mentioning a payroll tax. Sorry, as I'm being crazy with my highlighting here. But many states are considering a long-term care payroll tax that allows an LTCI exemption. It doesn't push. It just kind of puts it out there as an item and it's listed there. And if you go line by line, it may just come up in the conversation, right? So again, I'm just going to keep pushing this because it is your outline to your report to the group. So we hear about it, but surprisingly less than I thought, to be quite honest. Anybody else have any questions? Doesn't have to be related to the process. It can be anything group long-term care. We're all ears for 6 minutes max. Anything you want to leave the crowd with, Mark?
No, I think this has been a really good session, Jason. Thanks for the suggestion. Any sessions in the future that you want to get people's attention on?
Yeah, working on a couple carriers. I haven't been able to nail down a date with them yet, but we will have Trustmark back on in the next month or so. Tom Hamringhausen, who is our wholesaler contact at Trustmark with a higher quality mic, I have verified that, will be joining us to talk about Trustmark, who has 2 products for long-term care. So very, very interesting options there, and working on Equitable as well. Next week, we are going to look at an employer funding deep dive. Okay, so getting a little bit more into the weeds because people are uncovering smaller groups that are going to need employer funding. We're going to kind of talk through the ins and outs, premier strategies using employer funding, how to kind of broach that subject, how we come up with recommended employer funding amounts, and generally just how to take the temperature and work that into the conversation. Because I think small groups are great to work with, but if there's an employer funded component, it becomes a really, really nice sale and actually relationship builder in working with that group. So I'm excited to go through that one. But yeah, stay tuned otherwise.
I think Mim from Motivacare, who's on right now, we're going to have Mim on probably in the near future, I think.
I believe we had Mim on in the recent past.
Sorry, I missed that session. Okay, my bad.
I actually had to miss that
Thank you so
session
much,
too.
guys.
We were in St. Louis.
Yes, I was out. Sorry about that.
Yeah, and I have some updates for you, Mark, actually. There's been some other things going on, so we'll circle back with you too.
Yeah, we'll catch up.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for being here. Again, we're just going to try to impart our knowledge and our tools upon you as we come across them, as we learn them for ourselves. So, you know, whether you think you are cut out for it or not, whether you think you know enough to do this or not, I assure you, you are on the cutting edge of today's group long-term care market just by being here, listening, giving your thoughts and asking questions. So can't thank you enough for being here, and we will talk to you this time next week. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.